All right, we're going to transition into another panel, and this one is on customer retention, building a robust integrated marketing strategy to improve customer loyalty and retention. So I'll welcome Kobi Ben-Meir, the Chief Marketing Officer and Principal at YesLender, Tiffany Fields, Vice President Communications, Comprehensive Retirement Solutions, Tim Richards, Marketing Director, Activation Engagement at Charles Schwab, and Sarah Schmidt may be joining us in a little bit here, and she's Vice President, Enterprise Strategy at Agricultural Financial Services Corporation. And I'll be moderating this. This will be another panel conversation. So if we want, we could maybe just take 30 seconds or a minute and go around in a little introduction more about the companies you guys are coming from and your backgrounds. Then we can get into some questions. Someone would like to volunteer to jump in and go first?
Yeah, sure, I can go first. Well, nice to be here today, and nice to meet you, Kelly. I'm from YesLender. We do small business financing in the MCA space. I joined the company following an acquisition of a startup that I founded a few months ago. We merged into YesLender, and I became the CMO and one of the principals of the company. We focus heavily on making the product of business financing more accessible to business owners with better terms and better process. And big part of our mantra is customer experience and customer retention. So this panel fits right into to what we do on a daily basis. We rely heavily on data and our team. Our HQ is in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, and we have a satellite office here in New York where I'm located. And that's pretty much it.
Tiffany? Oh, I believe you're on mute.
Forgot we did that. I'm Tiffany Fields with Comprehensive Retirement Solutions. We're an independent financial services firm affiliated with Cetera Advisors. We're located in Carmel, Indiana. Our firm specifically, my husband and I run. We work with families, we work with small businesses, and we focus on, obviously, in a very saturated market of financial services firms, how we can elevate the experience to bring an integrated approach as we own a tax firm as well, to bring all the services together for our clients.
I'll go last. Tim Richards. I actually am formerly with Charles Schwab, so I just transitioned recently, working for a company called Hearsay Systems, which helps with last mile engagement for the financial services industry. But more pertinent, while at Schwab, over a relatively long career, probably about the past 4 years, I was in charge of engagement for the mass affluent retail audience. So you had people with investable assets or wealth tiers, probably more below that $1 million, between $1 million and $250,000 in assets under management. Our job was to take the clients, once they were part of the Schwab ecosystem, and figure out non-obtrusive yet relevant ways to engage with them, to not only just keep them happy and with the firm, but also provide some relevant information and opportunities for the next best step for them. So we might say cross-sell. I won't say that today, just one time only. But we tried to avoid the term just as an exercise to think more about people's needs in a given situation, versus a product that we needed to sell to them to make sure that they had a larger share of wallet, et cetera, et cetera. So we interface with a lot of groups across the firm, huge relationship with our data team. And I think over the course of this discussion, we'll get into some of the challenges we discover with trying to really make this super tangible from that retention standpoint.
Great, wonderful. Thank you for the introductions. Yeah, we can jump in into the questions and just have some discussion around this. So as you're managing a marketing strategy, integrated marketing strategy, how do you determine the appropriate combination of integration for the specific industries that you're in? As you look at channel and data and the different areas of what needs to be integrated. If someone would like to volunteer to go first, we can go in reverse order if you guys want this time.
You know, I was actually I was gonna suggest maybe Kobi wants to go first, only because I think he's got a probably Kobi and Tiffany have more of an acquisition lens than I did, and then so we can kind of go across the lifespan, and then I can take it at the end and talk more about just when people have become clients and had some tenure with us.
Yeah, sure. I can go first. And team is a bit familiar with what I'm doing now. We've been on several panels together by now. So I can only attest to the industry that I'm in, which is the small business financing. And the way, look, usually the traditional path in our industry is we're using brokers and middlemen to bring you the business in. And what I did also with the previous brand that I managed and what we're doing now in YesLender is focusing on how to target the business owner themselves. And by doing that, then I need to ask myself exactly that question that you just asked, Kelly. What is the right combination of channels for me to try and target that business owner or the different business owners based on the industry that they're in? And it's not one answer. Because the product is the same, the answer is different for each industry that I'm targeting. And I'll give you examples. For example, let's say I'm targeting businesses that are restaurants or catering businesses. Some of them might be on social media, the business owners, all of them. This is my baseline assumption that all the business owners, regardless of the industry, they're also consumers. And if you look at them as consumers, they're on social media, they're on Instagram, they're on Twitter, they're everywhere you go. So first you can target them there. But how do you segment them into the right industry? So you go and you choose the different placements and you focus heavily on content. That's at least what we do. I focus on specific content per industry or specific content that's relevant in general for that business owner. And if I go beyond the scope of social media, then it really differs by the industry. So the answer is you need to look at where your audience is and based on that determine the right combination. And it's almost never just one set of combinations. It's multiple set of combinations that have to work together in order to bring you the right mix of targeting that you can generate good results from, at least from my product and how we operate, what our strategy is.
Well, for us, we've been referral only for about 15 years, which is a unique position to be in, especially for me, and trying to utilize the capacity that I have. And so what we started doing is, from an external perspective, utilizing some of the lead services that are out there, but we utilize a lead service for taxes, and then we utilize a lead service for financial services, and we do those separately because the unique users are looking for something different. And it's amazing to me how often they overlap. People are looking for things, they don't even know they're looking for them. And that's the hard part about finding new people is a lot of times you're putting information in front of them and they don't know yet that they need something. And it's not always the people who are saying, I really need to find a financial advisor. It's usually the person who is having a conversation with someone and realizes, hey, I could use that, which is one of the reasons that referrals have been such a great source for us for so long. But once we acquire those clients, I think that we utilize segmentation and demographics for the biggest effect. And then we survey our clients because everyone's going to value something slightly different. And so we can put our value proposition out there, but we really don't know what is most effective at appealing to them. So I have to ask. I can't assume. I think assuming as a marketer is one of our biggest failures because we think that what appeals to one group is going to appeal to another. That's a basic answer.
So in my case, it's really interesting. We've got B2B and we have very focused B2C, and then I've got retail. So retail brokerage, right? Schwab's like a supermarket for financial services. So obviously from the acquisition side, there's a whole world that focuses on that and decides how they're going to be in the different channels. They do broadcast, they do a lot of content, obviously, is a huge play. But one thing that we try and remember, even across silos, is that, you know, clients are still people, right? Even prospects are still people. But the thing about clients that really struck us a few years ago is that we had been thinking so much in terms of our own internal organization that we didn't remember enough that clients do a lot of things with us outside of the login site. So we have a tendency to think in terms of, you know how it is internally, right? Well, somebody owns the prospect experience, somebody owns the client experience, and we were forgetting that those things are probably blended in the minds of the clients. So one of the first things we did was just to be aware and coordinated with what was happening out in the acquisition world, so that we didn't have anything that seemed weird or odd. That was kind of a first step. And then once we started to think about clients and client channels, as the retention, the group focused on retention, the first thing we did was try and map out the ecosystem internally. So what are all the things going to clients anyway? What's the experience like? So if you're a new client, there's an onboarding experience. So we figured, gee, we might want to let that run, right? That needs to run its own course and be effective. Anytime someone adds a new product, they have an onboarding experience. There are various, I promise not to say the word more than once and I won't, various product focused campaigns, distinct point in time campaigns that may be running in any particular week or quarter. So when we're going to lay over some type of retention effort, how does it fit in the open spaces there? What are the most relevant ways to do that? And so with that thinking, we came up with a couple of ideas, and what we tried to do is use people's behaviors as predictors for relevant messages. That was one main thing. The other thing is we had already established a regularly scheduled, if you will, newsletter type element. And so we experimented with that a little bit in terms of different targeting and using, I'm going to say AI just because it's always fun to put that, because you have to say that if you're on a panel. We use some AI to figure out what topics might be right for people depending on their actions and their segments. And so we blended those in over time, and we did some experiments so that we weren't disrupting or overstepping other people's efforts, but that we were still, you know, something new and something ideally valuable to the people. I think the folks are getting it. The last point, Tiffany's right. Like, you know, there's probably important financial moments in a person's lifespan. I think you can usually count those with two hands, max. There just aren't that many things unless, like, you are somebody who's, I don't know, big into crypto or an options trader, or you get in a business that gets bought 8 times, right? Or have a huge inheritance or something of that nature. Generally, these are inflection points. Most people aren't so engaged with financial services that they're actively planning ahead for that moment. Usually what happens is life dictates when a decision needs to be made. So one of our challenges was, how can we be intelligent with people's financial situation, but also their life stage over time, so that we were at least there kind of on the radar, you know? So when the moment came up when they needed some help, ideally they would have realized it, or they would have remembered that we had the services that they need. And so I think we'll talk a little bit more about segments, I think, later on, but that was a big thing for us, was to understand that we couldn't and didn't expect an instant activity, instant conversion, so to speak. We knew it was going to be a more long-range effort over time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the next few questions definitely going to dive deeper into, you know, the data, segmentation, that sort of thing. So how do you use data to develop and alter those segments? Because people evolve, individuals, groups, like, you know, the world changes, crypto gets introduced as a decision. People have to, do I want to engage with crypto or not? So like, how do you, each of you, look at data and then use that to develop those segments over time as it changes?
So why don't I start, because I can go from that retail deep kind of level, and we can build up this time instead of coming the other way. So segmentation is just a bunch of options, depending on your internal structure, how focused your company is on the segments, what's actually programmed in your system. So we had a couple of different approaches that we looked at. One is, if your company has a bunch of products, those products are designed for certain people. Even if they're designed by folks who only think about the product and maybe aren't like thinking so much about the actual quote unquote end user, they have a target in mind. So that is one way to start thinking about, okay, you know, who are the groups of people that we have based on what products are we selling or what products have the most uptake. That was one thing. The other one is we found really good from a strategic level had to do with life stage. So again, it's not super complicated with financial services in terms of what happens over the course of time. Everyone is slightly different, but again, you're going to get a mean that's relatively, you know, that bell is pretty big on the distribution. So start to look at what are those life stages and where do your customers, where do they segment out? Do you have a big bubble in the younger or millennial? Do you have a big bubble at retired or transitioning into retirement? So how does that play out? And then overlay something else which might be relevant. For example, if it's a business, it could be revenue. If it's an individual person, it could be investable assets. So start to look at your populations that way and try and get meaningful groups. The challenge is that those groups or segments have to be programmed in such a way that it works with whatever CRM you're using or data pools you're using or your communications platform. So we found that it was good to start small in that direction. The other thing, though, we had towards the end of this kind of 3 or 4 year run was we started to have segments that were actually, this is not the correct term, but it's the one I used that made it easy for me, hard-coded. So individual clients were assigned to particular segments. If that exists in your enterprise or your business, you have a really wonderful starting place because it's there and it's super tangible. And so we started with that also as a way to move forward and try and segment people. Now that doesn't mean that because they're in the same segments they have the same interests, but it allows you to chop down into smaller groups so that you can begin to do some testing and try and figure out if you're getting traction.
I have to connect to your point, Tim, about the life cycle. You know, life cycle is a segment of the user. For us, is when I look at the business owner or the business itself. I always try to identify where they're at, because some of them are so many new businesses opening every month in the States, and they go through a cycle of we have revenue, we don't have revenue, and even established businesses go up and down, and you need to try and identify where that business stands at this point. When are they ready to acquire more capital? And for us, it's less about are they looking for products like, you know, like for Tim and Tiffany. For us is when are they ready to get our product, because businesses always need capital. So we do try also to be in the area at all times, and we do try to keep our brand in mind, even for startups and new companies, but even established businesses, especially now post-COVID, that it's still very shaky and not all the businesses have enough revenue yet or enough flow to show us the last few months. The segments that we try to identify change all the time. And here I can connect to the AI point. Is one of the tools that we try to use and apply is to take the performance based on the campaigns and let that black box really analyze the data to give us the output without making the assumption ourselves. And I think that's the next big leap for us as marketers, is to trust the data, not in a way that we analyze it, but really in a way that we let the machine analyze it for us and make unbiased choices based on not just for risk analysis and other segments that are already very implemented, but also for marketing, even to the level of this segment works or not and turn it off or not automatically if you have enough data to base it on. And we all have enough data if we run enough marketing budget on a monthly basis with our different segments.
Well, when we're talking about segments, we can either look at prospecting segments or you can look at current client segments. And in prospecting segments, I break down all of our product offerings. So how are we going to attract those particular groups? Is it through taxes? Is it through insurance? Is it through financial planning? Is it through investments? And those are the various ways that we can attract new business. But what I really focus on even more is the business that we currently have. And like you said, Kobi, we have data. Every organization has some type of a CRM, or at least they should, to capture data in. And extrapolating who your clients are and how they're broken down is key, so that you can continue to communicate with the clients that you already have and determine what's important to them, so that they can, as I mentioned before, for our purposes, refer more people like them, or so that you can cross-sell to the people that you already have the other services that are available. Because I don't know about you, but we find people all the time who don't fully understand the capabilities of our firm, because we do have multi-products available. We're not affiliated with a product company, so we do not have to sell one thing. We can utilize whatever is out there that's most appropriate for the client in their situation. So communicating that message is definitely important, and utilizing the segmentation that we have internally, whether it's, initially driven by AUM, because everyone should be evaluating that, because obviously various clients are going to bring in different levels of revenue. So that's critical. Everyone should look at AUM. But then beyond that, what else do you have demographic related various types of information that can help you get a little bit more of a heavier, more natural, connected relationship with the clients that you already have?
There's a really good thing to remember that, when you're marketing, I mean, obviously when you're marketing to prospects, you're trying to bring them in to read your information. There has to be a good value exchange for them, right? If they come to your space, do they get something out of it? I think with clients, it's even more important to have that value exchange and be thinking about that over the long term. To Tiffany's point, it's hard to underestimate probably what your current clients know about your firm, because their window most likely is about this big, and that size is probably their account summary page on your website or their mobile phone. That's where they are. So being patient with letting them know what you have over time, and again, providing something of use or of interest, that value exchange, I think is really, really important. What Tiffany's saying is right on point, is that it's a retention and additional share of wallet is a long play. It's something that takes some stamina, and you have to be careful and be ready for it to take some time, and just be watching their behavior to make sure that you're not alienating them through opting out, etc.
I have to add to that is that I found that the customers that come back and retain with us the most are the ones that feel more connected, to your point, Tim, to what we do, to what the company is. And one of the ways that we apply in order to expose more of our customers, other than just the experience of working with the team and having a great user experience the first time they come and exposed to our brand, is going back to the content part. And the content is not just marketing content. It's the added value, like the knowledge-based content, to try and position us as a brand. And I think every brand should try and do that, even if you don't have a lot of resources. Whatever you can, and I'm sure, Tiffany, in your field, it's very important also to have a lot of pieces of information and a lot of data that the customer can read without any obligation. Something that is an interest to them, something that has to do for us with their business, with what we can do, and not just what we can do with our product, but what they as a business owner can do in their space and in their industry. And we find that works really good when we come to the renewal point, or the additional point when they need more funds. They prefer choosing us versus going to the competition, even if the deal with the competition is better for them, just because they have the confidence in us and in our brand.
Yeah, wonderful. It's sort of been touched on a little bit, but how do you decide what's important to your segments? And I think, Tiffany, you mentioned at times too, people may not even know what they want. So, how do you know if they don't know it's important? I think all of us as marketers can relate to that one way or another. But Yeah, how do you decide whether it's the data surveys, you name it, whatever it is, what's important to people or what they're going to want in the future or need in the future?
Well, this is another one of those places where we focus more on our current clients than we do on acquiring new ones, because we don't want to be a mobile phone company. Let's be honest. If you've ever been marketed to by a mobile phone company, you know that new clients are significantly more important to them than the current client. And we're going to mark up your bill and we're not going to give you as much. But if you transition to a new company, they're going to give you all kinds of amazing things. And we don't want to be a mobile phone company. We want them to stay with us and know that as a current client, they're going to continue to get that much more because we value their relationship even more than acquiring a new customer. So we always look at assets. I mean, I go back to AUM, and it's not just from a profitability standpoint, but if you have a client who has millions of dollars, you're going to give more services and more attention to that client than you are someone who has, you know, $50,000 invested, whatever your breakdown may be. But what there's going to be, and it's not that that client is any less significant, it's that the service offering has to incrementally grow with the segmentation. So you have to look at it as a consumer and give them more products and more services with the growth of their assets. I think that's just very natural in any type of a program, whether you're looking at, you know, a frequent flyer program or, you know, a hotel program. You know that the more stays you have, the more benefits you're going to have because that deepens the relationship and there's more of a commitment on the consumer side.
I think sometimes it can depend too on what's your interface with the client. So just take the retail brokerage account, right? If you've got somebody who has some significant assets, they probably have someone assigned to them to be some type of a consultant or advisor. So, or perhaps in Kobi's case, there's a relationship manager for each account. So if there is a person there, then that person is the one who can start to at least engage and then get a sense of who that client is. And then that information can bubble up and then potentially change your segments. If you've got no direct connection other than a login and electronic communications, then it gets a different kind of interesting. And I think the trick, and I don't have a, you know, it's not science, it's more art, but is to start with segments that are big enough so that you have room to change them over time. One of the things that we tried to do was just look at people's digital footprints. People will show you what they're interested in by their behavior on your website. So as much information as possible as you can get, that way it can help you be more relevant. It can be sticky because it depends on the relationship your firm has with its customers. There's a little bit of, we used to call it the sketch factor. So if you know too much and you show somebody you know that much, that can be creepy, right? I don't think the creep index necessarily is super high for older people and low for younger people. It seems like people who are younger don't like it too, depending. So again, you kind of have to test your way in, but that's one way to do it. So find people who are, a really simple example is find a group of clients who are visiting a page on a specific type of account. Let's take the 529 account. Well, that gives you some information there, especially a 529, because there's one reason really to have one. That's you have a dependent and you want to fund their education. So take that group, test, A/B test or whatever, giving them information or not, and see what happens. That can give you an indication if that's the way to think about that as you move forward. Also, just a couple things, Kobi, before I let you chime in, because I'm sure that from the B2B perspective, it's super interesting. I think it's good to have your segment be a segment as long as it can versus like creating 83 segments, but maybe there are subgroups underneath. So you can fold in personas. If you have a big data group, they might have done that for you. So you might have people who don't have an advisor who are investing for retirement. You may have a group that doesn't like technology and a group that does like technology. Start there. That's a huge hint, right? People who are new to the firm versus not, You can try to do things like people who seem to apparently have changed their beneficiaries and they have children or they've bought a house. It's very difficult in my experience to be timely with that information. But again, that gives you a little deeper, like second or third level to go in with, on top of a fairly large segment, and then test through and see what is working over time. Again, it takes patience, but you can find more ways to make your segments more interesting, more targeted, more persuasive.
You know what, Tim? It's interesting because you would assume that in our space that we try to do like a human personal touch, but we focus a lot on trying to find a balance between the human aspect and the automated aspect, because you can't really scale if you need to assign a person to each account.
People, yeah.
It's hard to scale with people, and this is where we're at right now, or the industry as a whole is like, how do you take what used to be a very personal, human, one-on-one relationship and translate that to the AI digital world, make sure everything is automated, and that really touches the point that you said about personalization. How much do you tell them that you know? Because if they opened an account with you, they know you know a lot. But if you just have the prospect and you try to capture their attention and you give them more information than what you're supposed to, and I found that if you use more than just pretty much the person name and the company name, it's too much for someone who doesn't work with you. And even sometimes the company name is even too much for them, because how do you know where I work? How do you know my company? So I like that point. I can really relate to that. That's the challenge, and my approach with that is always to A/B test, like take a segments and you do an email, you do an ad, even with ads today with the AI tools that we apply to writing the content and writing the copy. It's interesting to see those tools are very effective, but you still need to test different variations of the outcome that they give you and test the result based on that. So we're just in the early stages of testing automated tools in order to get to a full-on scale capabilities of one-on-one relationship that are not human-based.
What's nice with that too is that it allows you to discover sometimes things that seem counterintuitive that you probably wouldn't have discovered. So for a while, we were heavily involved with client marketing to people who were traders. And they, in general, so these are people who love to trade stocks. And when I mean traders, I don't mean someone trading a bunch of things every day. These are folks who are just very active buying and selling. They usually don't consider themselves to be traders anyway, but we were marketing to them via clients, via content articles about trading. And they have almost an insatiable appetite for information. It's like part of the profile. But what was funny is that we had some results come back that we should include things about like mortgage refinancing or just long-term investing, things you wouldn't think that would be interesting to that group. They were for one band within this vertical of traders. There was a big band in there. They loved those topics. They had super high engagement. So we started to send them that information, and it worked really well. And I don't think we would have come up with that. I mean, you can see the meeting, right? We're like, we should send them out something about long-term investing and dollar cost averaging, and everybody would be like, that's stupid. These are traders. But because the AI did it, and we were willing to trust it, at least in an experiment, we learned something, useful.
Data. It's all data. Once we trust the data, we do more.
Great. We have a couple minutes left. I see one question coming through in the Q&A. We had one more question too that we were gonna ask. So maybe we do that and then tackle the Q&A, and then we can wrap it up. But the title of this is customer retention. So how much retention engagement is enough? You see some companies who are sending me, for example, personal loan leads every day at 5 o'clock. I get the same email for the last 2 years. I won't name names. But for you guys, what's the right balance? And maybe different versus, the business you're in.
The right balance is not to get people like you complain about it. That's the right balance. And I think that that's another question you meddle with there all the time. Like, how much is too little and how much is too much? Like, where's the balance? And I think there's not one answer for that. It really depends on the target, and even for us, it depends on the urgency. If you know a specific segment, has more need for capital in our case, then you might tap more on that segment than a different segment. But the more interested the party looks, like if you collect enough data, then you see how many pages they visited, how many times they came back, how many emails they opened, if they opened like if they replied to the text message or they did any interaction with you, then you tap more on them. And if they didn't interact with you at all for a period of time, then you start fading that out. I think my role is that if after 6 times in a span of about 4 weeks, you didn't get any interaction, then don't touch that lead until at least a few months in the future. So you don't burn that lead because it will end up in the spam box and we'll end up having the same. I have the same attitude as you when I see the same emails come every day, twice a week from the same companies, and I just ignore them.
The biggest one to me is just how's your response? I'm not so worried about if you want to track your clicks. I wouldn't be so worried about a reduction in clicks. It may be that person is finding their own baseline. It may be that your content wasn't interesting that time. It's really hard to be definitive about that. But any type of unsubscription activity, that's a clear bell. So that's something you look at across the population, like, wow, this is generating some unsubs that we don't want to generate. And hopefully your system is smart enough so that they can maybe ask for fewer emails or more time between them, or you may even have topics associated with, and you can adjust from there. Some firms, it's literally on or off. So it's a real bummer when they opt out. So I think that's like the biggest signal to me. I love Tiffany's idea of, actually sounds crazy, right? Ask them. Go ahead and spend the time and the money and do some focus groups or do some surveys, whatever way works for your firm. Ask people what they're interested in. That could be part of the onboarding experience. Often it is. What topics do you want? Generally, people click a bunch of boxes and then they never change that for decades. So go back and ask them again. Those are ways to figure it out. And then if you have the ability to have, KPI that is retention or attrition, however you're going to decide to measure that may be dependent on your firm. Just watch that metric, but it's going to be slow. I think marketers are like, we're used to drinking, soda. We want that burst right away. And this is not that case. This is a slow food movement. You're looking at a year or something, to really get a sense of what's happening. So you have to have that patience to just keep watching and keep adjusting.
I think regarding engagement, again, like I've mentioned before, you have to break apart your prospects and your clients because your retention is going to be different in each of them. I know where my numbers are in my clients and I send them independently so that I can watch that data. I anticipate obviously my clients having a much higher engagement rate because they're wanting the information from us and they expect it as a part of the service model. So I know that if it drops below a certain percentage, then I need to start changing the message that I'm sending to them. However, prospects are going to be significantly lower because you're not anticipating them to act on it as frequently as you would clients. Obviously, everybody would want 100%, but that's not really attainable in any world. So.
So we have time to kind of wrap up with one question from the Q&A. We touched on it a little bit, but can you talk a little bit more about finding the balance between the human and digital touch? Maybe some examples or use cases where you've implemented one over the other or the two together. We got a couple minutes, so if all you want to chime in or one or two of you have any thoughts on that, open to ideas.
Yeah, so finding the balance is what we try to do is we try to identify the touch points that you see that you need someone to step in. And that can be many things. It can be during the initial application or the renewal application process that they get stuck. Maybe they drop off. Maybe they don't want to connect their banking assets again or at all, and then you need someone to talk to them if they have any questions. And how we know they have questions is that if they open FAQs, if they drop out at a specific point that is really important for the process, or even if they get to a stage that they get an offer or they get a proposal for financing from the team or from the system, and they just ghost you or disappear, or they just don't choose what you send them or even give you a feedback, then it probably means that someone needs to step in and interact with them and understand the reason for that specific pain point in the process, regardless if it's a new acquisition or a retained customer. It's the same process, and it's never perfect. You need to keep adjusting it. You need to keep monitoring the data all the time. But if you see a specific drop in a specific point, that's where you need to step in.
All right, great. That's a great place to stop. And Tiffany, Tim, and Kobi, it was a wonderful panel, and really appreciate your time today. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, Kelly.
Take care.